Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. 249 to the Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy, Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts.
Secretary Roberts.
Presiding Officer, the question asks about the unspent balances for the years ending 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. The unspent balances that I wish to report for fiscal 2021 was 65,488,470. For end of fiscal 2022, 113,319,559. At the end of fiscal 2023, the unspent balances was 133,361,471. And we do not have a final unspent balances for fiscal 2024 because, as you would appreciate, we have a manual system and we are still doing reconciliations. But the unspent balances so far is estimated at $121 million.
Follow-up, Minority Councillor.
Presiding Officer, can the Secretary indicate in terms of the unspent balances what they were expended on?
Secretary Roberts.
Answers, and I only came with that response.
Follow-up, Minority Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, what we recognize is that the unspent balances from 2021 to 2023 would have increased over the 3 years.
Do you have a question, Minority Councillor?
Yes. I am putting it in context, Madam Presiding Officer. We have heard the administration speaking to underfunding and lack of resources coming from the central government. If that is the case, Madam Presiding Officer, why do we see an increase in unspent balances between 2021 to 2022 and 2022 to 2023?
Secretary Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And whilst you're hearing from the other side about management of the resources, this administration had to take a deliberate step to withhold funds or not release funds so that the unspent balances will look like this in order to supplement and fund CPEP and URP, because we would have inherited a bill of CPEP and URP over the years, and this really includes the wages of these workers. So it has increased, and that is deliberately so, because we have to fund these projects, and we have not received any increases for these programs since we have come into office. Even with public sector workers getting an increase of $2, we have not seen an increase in CPEP and URP from central government. So we have to now manage how we take care of each fiscal going forward. So right now, this Assembly, in its prioritization process, we have to also look at fiscal 2026 and how we're going to fund these programs. And that is why you're seeing an increase in unspent balances. Also, Madam Presiding Officer, I'd like to say that the current process of the Assembly being so manual, it's a bit difficult to spend each and every cent at the end of the year, and this is part of the problem in terms of why we have unspent balances.
Follow-up, Minority Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, the Secretary in the previous follow-up, said that she could not indicate what the unspent balance was used for. And now the Secretary is saying they had to pay CPEP and URP workers. Which is it? Is it that
I'm sure there's a question inside there somewhere.
Yes, Madam Presiding Officer. I'm wondering whether or not the Secretary knows or she does not know.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Madam Presiding Officer, in the previous follow-up, the Secretary indicated that she was not prepared or she does not know what the unspent balances were utilized for. In asking the question why it increased, the Secretary now says that it increased because they are prioritizing the payment of URP and CPEP. Which is it, Madam President? Is the Secretary unaware or is there a prioritization?
Secretary Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. The councillor, minority councillor, asked what it was spent on. It wasn't only spent on URP and CPEP. You want me to go back to 21, 22, 23. If you want me to answer a question in totality, I'll have to bring all the data. CPEP and URP only forms part of the funding of the unspent balances. And if you want me to respond, I have to respond completely. If I say CPEP and URP, it is not only funding CPEP and URP. It funded CPEP and URP, yes, but that was not all that was funded. And if that is the question, Madam Presiding Officer, can you allow me to answer at a subsequent time in totality of what 2021, 2022, 2023 unspent balances was used to fund?
I would allow you to submit your detailed response in writing to the minority
Certainly, Madam Presiding Officer.
leader's office through the office of the clerk. Question.